Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today again with Gooroo Live. I am Sean Barron, your guru, and I'm joined here today by Jason Clark. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for inviting me on, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here and kind of talk with your listeners about some important things.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate your time. We know you're a busy man. Jason, for those who might not know about you or who you are and some of your initiatives, can you take a moment just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jason Clark. Let's see. So I guess I have a couple of hats. I'm an assistant attorney general over at the New York State Attorney General's office for Letitia James, who's the state attorney general for New York. And of course, as a lawyer, first thing I always say when I say something like that, I'm here in my individual capacity. So anything I say is Jason saying it, not anyone on behalf of the office. But at the Attorney General's office, what we do is we investigate and prosecute different fraud that happens in our community and try to figure out ways to help people who may not have access to legal resources themselves. In addition to that, there's a program started called DREAMChasers, and DREAMChasers provides free tutoring and mentoring to help kids from low income and underrepresented backgrounds get into, some of the top high schools here in New York. So yeah, just, trying to figure out ways, to kind of give back and, once again, glad to be here.
Perfect. So the first thing I typically like to start off with is asking people how they got into their chosen profession. You with law, what motivated you to become a lawyer? And what was sort of the background behind that decision?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story for me. So, I more or less knew I wanted to become a lawyer ever since I was probably finishing high school. And I think that's really because during my senior year in high school, I went to high school in the Bronx. And during my senior year was the year that an individual named Amadou Diallo was shot by 4 plainclothes police officers. He was a recent immigrant. He was reaching for his wallet. And during that time, 4 officers, approached him, thinking that he fit the description of, someone, I guess, that they claimed they were that they were pursuing, and they shot him. And they didn't just shoot him once or twice; they shot him 41 times. And I just remember at that time, this Scott Amadou, who was like 23, so he was just a few years older than myself and some of my classmates. We just felt like this was wrong, because not only did it happen, but then the officers responsible ended up getting acquitted. So myself and some of my other classmates, we created this student demonstration. I think we did a lot of some of the stuff that we've been seeing today. And I remember as, we were talking with various leaders that were in the community, or even to the district attorney's office who actually prosecuted the case, there are all these reasons that were given for the acquittal and what have you, but to me, it never really sounded like justice. And, I felt from that point on that, if I wanted to be able to be part of the solution in some type of way, try to get my own legal degree and see what I could do to try to be able to help communities. So, again, that's crazy because that was back in, 1999 and 2000. And, so many of those same issues, we're dealing with today. But I will say, it definitely feels like there's a different energy this year than, this time than maybe we even saw back then. So anyway, so that's kind of how I got interested in law. And actually the reason why I joined the Attorney General's office is because during that time, I was doing research on stop and frisk, which a lot of folks may be familiar with now, which is when an officer may come up to you and stop you and, essentially perform a frisk. And there is a lot of research out there indicating that individuals of color, especially Black and Latinx folks, were being stopped at an unconscionably higher level than other folks. And at that time, the only office that was actually doing research on this was this office called the New York State Attorney General's office. So I tried to do a little research, I guess, I tried to intern there when I was in college. And then, as soon as I graduated law school, I knew that's where I wanted to start my career. So here I am.
Things we're dealing with 20 years ago are still relevant today, but hopefully there is more momentum, which is
right.
Fantastic. As you went into a little bit, your work with DREAMChasers, I've seen you've received the Excellence in Activism Award. I mean, you're wearing a ton of different hats. You have so much going on. How do you create that work-life balance? And how do you, specifically now during quarantine where maybe you can't go outside or you can't go to a restaurant or the movies and unwind, how do you find that balance in your personal life?
Yeah, I don't know. If someone finds the answer, I would love to hear it. For me, it's kind of been that, I've always felt very appreciative of like the opportunities that, myself, that I've been able to have, going to, a great school and being able to get a great education, and just kind of feeling that, we all have an obligation to pay it forward in some type of way. And, just trying to figure out different ways you can be able to do so. So like I said, when we're talking about law, when I was thinking of a career, it felt like, this is the best way to be able to, make a difference in people's lives. I know that when it comes to education, I was extremely fortunate to be able to go to one of New York City's specialized high schools, Bronx Science. And I firmly believe that the education I received at Bronx Science put me on track to be able to get into, a great college, go to law school, and, achieve my dreams of becoming a civil rights attorney. But I also know when we're talking specifically about, for example, all these different projects that people may have, it's just, what I've realized is the more passionate you are about something, the more you kind of figure out time for it. So, if there's something that, I need to do, it may be a little harder. I may kind of put that off to the next day and others, which I shouldn't do. I certainly need to get better about that. But when you feel, invested in what it is you're doing, or that there's a purpose to what you're doing, the days get, the time that you have gets longer. Right. And I mean that like as a positive. I mean, it's not that you're working on something like, oh, I've been working on this for an hour or 2 hours. Next thing you know, you've been working on something, you've been working on it for 3 hours and it doesn't even feel like it. So I guess what I'm saying is that when you feel, when you really invest in what you're doing, and you know that what you're doing can, really help other folks, it makes it a little easier to kind of find time in the day, because it's not a chore, but, it's kind of a privilege.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the great things about working in education. It's easy to be passionate about helping kids and allowing them to move forward.
Right.
Speaking about that, I'm curious, what sort of motivated your passion for education, and what was sort of the story behind Dream Chasers and getting that off the ground?
Oh, man. So, that's actually that's a good question. So Dream Chasers is a free tutoring program to help get kids into some top schools, especially, specialized high schools here in New York. And a lot of it, kind of like a lot of stories, for me, it really started with, my experiences with education. When I was in, I think it was first grade, my parents had me take an exam to get into one of the magnet programs in New York. And, apparently, because I don't remember much of this, but I've heard this multiple times from my folks. But apparently, I met all the qualifications. Met whatever marks I needed on whatever exams they had me take, but they didn't want to accept me into the program. And it was in a school district that had a history of discriminatory practices in the past. But for my parents, especially my mother, she really wanted me to be in here because she knew that in the school that I was at the moment, I wasn't being challenged the way they thought I needed to be challenged. And a lot of that wasn't even really the school's fault. It's just that a lot of the students there were already behind in certain ways. So they had to give them more time so that they can be able to do well. So the short of it is, even after they didn't let me into the program, that wasn't enough for my mother. My mother said, well, this doesn't sound right. So she reached out to the assembly members. She reached out to the borough president's office. She reached out to anyone who would listen. And eventually she was able to get a meeting with the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. And they agreed that what happened was discriminatory, and they brought a lawsuit on my behalf. And, the short of it is they eventually ended up accepting me into that program. And that program, again, I think was the first in a pipeline for me able to get into to have some of the education experiences that, helped me get to where I am today. And, to me, what's just so aggravating is that there aren't a lot of people in this world like my mother. And frankly, you shouldn't have to bring a lawsuit just to make sure that your kid can be able to get a quality education. So one of the ways that I thought that I could be able to help with making a difference, again, being someone who had gone to one of these specialized high schools and knows the impact it can have on someone's future, figured that, this is a good way to make a difference. And, 67 in New York City, 66% of all public school students are Black or Latinx, yet less than 11% are accepted into any of these specialized high schools in any given year. And it's not because, folks of color, can't do it or can't do well, but they just don't always have the same access to resources. So my thought had been is if we can put together a framework where folks can be able to get some of that test preparation, that they can be matched with people who look like them, who have been able to get into these schools or been able to do things that the students want to do themselves. Those are the things that can be able to overcome some of those inequities that people already see in their schools. And that's kind of where the idea for Dream Chasers started. We started off with 10 kids our first year because, that's how much we were able to fundraise enough money to get started with. And of those kids, one student got into Bronx Science, another student got into Brooklyn Latin, and one of just the 7 Black students who got into Stuyvesant out of, I believe, 942 students came from our program. So, we're trying to make sure we're breaking barriers, from the very beginning, and just make sure people know that if people have an opportunity to do well, they will surprise you. They will exceed your expectations. And to me, it's just been a privilege to be able to part of this, be a part of this chapter of these, of the lives of these just amazing and awesome students.
That's a great story. One of the biggest takeaways I had for any students listening, listen to your mother, because you will not persuade. You want something done, mom will find it. My mom.
You don't know how many times I've been like, I know what I'm doing, and then later on I find out, like, man, I really wish I did. So they know a little bit. They know a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing. As successful as you are, mom still knows best, right?
Right. I'm sure she's going to be tweeting this and saying like, Jason, I saw it and I want you to know, I heard what you're saying and you better start taking your own advice.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on how COVID is going to affect or impact education now. There's been a lot of talk about the educational gap widening now with a lack of resources for certain students, depending where they are, everything going virtual. What are your thoughts there, and what can be done to make sure that gap does not widen in days like today?
Yeah, I mean, this has been such a challenging time. And what I really worry about is there are so many students out there who may already be going to under-resourced schools, which are already having issues with, funding or maybe not enough teachers or what have you. So they already have so many obstacles that they have to overcome. And then when you put in this extra just gargantuan hurdle here, it can have some real tremendous, ramifications for the future of our students. And, trying to figure out a way to get around this. I mean, I think this may be one of the more recent or probably one of the largest civil rights issues, I think, of this generation. I guess the way I start and I think about this is to just kind of like, let's set the table, right? So here in New York, there's under the New York State Constitution, it says that every student is entitled to a sound and basic education. And what that means is that people, folks, whoever it is you are, if you're going to school here in New York, there are certain things that you are entitled to under the law. And this could start to get a little complicated, but there is this case, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, where the Court of Appeals had ruled that, this is right. The education that we're getting in a lot of our schools is not meeting that threshold of a sound and basic education. So that means, we need more teachers. We need smaller classroom sizes. We need more resources so people can learn the skills that they need to be successful, in a 21st century environment. And then again, you put COVID on this, then it makes things a lot tougher. For me, a lot of it really has to do with figuring out ways to really be able to make remote learning effective. I think remote learning is a tremendous and a wonderful thing. I think that what we have right now is a system that's maybe, I think, premature. I don't think we're really ready for all of this, but I do think that being able to put together a effective and sound remote learning system can really be, the answer to a lot of these questions we have. And one of the things I hear so much about when it comes to remote learning is that it's hard to be able to keep the students engaged. And I think part of that is because we have a lot of teachers who never have had to do this before. We're essentially learning how to do. We're teaching people how to teach at a time when people need to be learning, much more than ever. So I think the question is, how do we learn from this? I always like to think that, when there's a problem, a problem is really, a solution that just hasn't found its answer yet. And the question is, how do we get there? And I think the answer is there, remote learning, because what we need, just like as I was saying, we need smaller class sizes. If there's a way we can figure out through remote learning where maybe we're able to get more teachers or teachers assistants who can be able to focus on kids who need some more of that individualized tutoring, that can be a benefit. If we can make sure that everybody, regardless of your income, has access to the bandwidth that you need, to be able to have a strong internet connection, that you can have the technological resources so you could do well here. There are so many opportunities that we can start opening up here. It's just about figuring out a way to be able to do so in the right way. And I think that's actually going to be the answer. So and you'll see this as you with all of these answers. Like as a lawyer, my answers will be much longer probably than they should be. But my thinking is that we need to be able to make sure that folks can get the additional preparation that they need right now. So, we have our classes, will be starting, again soon, or if they, for some people, they've already started. But making sure people have an opportunity to be able to get additional tutoring, like having tutoring times where people can be able to come in and learn about some of the stuff that they may have gotten behind on from the year before, given everything that's happened. Figuring out ways that we can be able to maximize these resources that we're putting together, making sure that we have people who can come in, who can talk and inspire people about computer science, can inspire people about how all of these resources that you have with a computer can enrich the learning experience. I think that we're going to get there, but that's got to be the answer. And we got to just make sure that all folks have as much access to being able to get tutoring and additional preparation as possible until we figure out a way to kind of get past this. But I think that's really going to be the answer.
Are you able to reach more kids now that they don't have to come to the physical location? Have you been making changes to the curriculum? Have you seen anything like that with the programs you're involved with?
Yeah, we made a lot of changes. So, part of Dream Chasers is that we wanted to make sure that the location where we do the tutoring was in zip codes where they are just historically under-resourced. So, the first location we had was over in Harlem at the Thurgood Marshall Academy, and then over at the Harlem YMCA, so that people didn't have to travel, ungodly amounts of time, after school to be able to get, the tutoring that they needed. And then we opened up a location in Southeast Queens at the Senior Educational Opportunity Center so that people can be able to get to their classes without having to go, very far. The kids that we have that are in Queens. Since COVID happened, one of the things I'm proud of is that we probably lost maybe about a week. And then after that, we were able to set up a remote learning framework so that folks can be able to start having their classes, online. So, our kids usually have classes during the year on Fridays after school from like 4:30 to 7, and then on Saturday mornings. In fact, our class should be ending right now, our Saturdays classes. And then in the summer, we usually have a boot camp, which will go through Monday through Thursday until, we go back to the Friday, Saturday curriculum. So I say that all to say that, we've also had to try to tackle and grapple with some of these issues, trying to do remote learning. In a lot of ways, it's hard because when you have students that are in your classroom, they're there, right? You can see them. They aren't maybe as likely to be, trying to do 4 other things that are going on while they're actually in the classroom. You can see them. And on top of that, you can do fun things. You can go, take them, if they're doing really, have like a pizza party. You could take them to go see like a baseball game or something like that. Now we've got to figure out other ways to be able to keep people enriched and engaged. And, I know for us, what we're looking to try to do is, like we're saying, trying to take advantage of the resources we have. So we're going to try to see if we have people who are doctors, or people who are, maybe someone, we've been talking to who's a NASA scientist, who could kind of come in and just talk about what it is they do and how they got there. So people can start to see that, it's not about just studying to study because your parents tell you to, or just because everyone's told you have to do it, but you can start to be able to see that by doing well here, this is going to open up opportunities for you in the future. So, that's always kind of been a part of what we try to do, which is make sure people have the foundational knowledge, but still also try to figure out ways to empower people to make them think that, why this is important. And now, for us, it's still the same mission, but just figuring out different ways to be able to get there. And just like everyone else, we're struggling with ways to be able to do this. There are days where, maybe the internet doesn't work for certain folks, or maybe people don't realize that, someone's coming to class a little late, that they're kind of in a waiting, all of these things that we're still trying to grapple with. But I'm kind of hoping that as, if we can be able to make it through these challenging times, that it's going to lead to more resources and more opportunities for kids in the future.
How would they go about contacting Dream Chasers if they think they need help? Or are there any other resources or tools you would recommend for students who may necessarily be in the area or be in New York?
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things we did do is, as soon as COVID hit, we decided, we would just try to figure out a way to be able to help more students. So earlier, actually at the beginning of August, we launched our COVID response initiative where we're able to provide, 50 additional students more test preparation, and just doing it through, just kind of, getting more instructors and kind of putting them into the fold of what we're doing. And even as we're having this, I'd be happy to have a conversation about some of the students that, who are interested in this, who may be listening or watching this podcast, to see if we could be able to help them as well. I know that for us, what we usually do is we try to get 7th grade students so that by the time they're ready to take the New York City Specialized High School exam in October, we've been able to give them, 10, 11 months worth of test preparation. Having said that, we've also been trying to do some things over the summer where we could at least be able to give some folks some, kind of just, again, like a boot camp's worth of stuff to kind of make sure that they know some of the tricks and that they are kind of prepared, when the tests come. So if people want to know about Dream Chasers, they could go to our website, which is www.dreamchasersnyc.com. That's DREAMChasersnyc.com. And just check it out. And if you have any questions, just like, most websites, there's a port where you can just kind of ask some questions and ask about, when we'll be taking students next, and, what it is that, we're looking to do and how it is that we're trying to help. And, maybe we just take it from that point.
Perfect. To bring it back to something you mentioned earlier, you've spoken a lot about how education and the institutions you attended played a huge role in your life and your success. I'm curious, how did you go about selecting your colleges? I believe you went to Princeton and Michigan. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I did. It's always a difficult, decision there. And I remember then feeling like, this is the most important decision I make in my life. And, it's an important decision. But the thing that I've really learned, and I've seen this again and again over my career, is that in a lot of ways, it actually doesn't, it's very, I think that, there are a lot of right answers. Let me start by that. So when you're picking a college to go to, or you're picking a grad school to go to, there isn't just one answer where if you go here, everything will work out perfectly. I think that no matter where you go, the same things that got you into college are going to be the same things that are going to make sure, you determine whether or not you've had a good experience or not. If you know how to, if you're a hard worker, if you're willing to be able to, figure out ways to kind of balance your time, if you're willing to just try to, do everything you can to do well, I firmly believe that you're going to find success wherever it is you are. Because, for example, like when I was at Princeton, there are some people who had gone to specialized schools, but there are a lot of people who had gone to a lot of other schools. When I was at Michigan for law school, there are some people who had gone to, Ivy League schools. There are a lot of folks who had gone to a lot of other schools who are doing well. When I was at my first job, there are people who had gone to Michigan, but there are a lot of people who went to other things. And you'll start to see as you go through these different rungs in your life that the common thread isn't the caliber or the ranking of a particular school. The caliber is these actual characteristics about the individual, which tend to be things like hardworking, which tend to be things like giving back, which tend to be things like investing in your own development. So I picked, when I picked Princeton, it was close, someone who's from New York. So there's a lot of things that you could do about that. I also ran track when I was in high school, and I wanted to walk on to a team. I thought I'd have a better chance at Princeton than at some of the other schools, even though I will say they actually have a very, very good track program, which I kicked my butt every year for my freshman year. But you know, I mean, it's funny because I know at that time I was just thinking about like the size of the school. I was thinking about, you know, all the food I can eat at the, you know, during the classes because I'd always eat up all the food in that house and there'd be no food left. I mean, those are the things I was thinking about, which I'm glad are not the only, you know, there are other things that some of these schools that they provide. But what I will say is that there are a lot of great schools out there, and you know, I know at Michigan, one of the things that I liked is that they had a really strong legal clinics program for people who are interested in kind of seeing what it is to practice law, which was a big thing for me. They had a terrific public interest program. And, you know, Princeton was just, you know, one of those, you know, great institutions that I heard about. So, you know, when I had the privilege of being accepted, you know, I just thought, you know, this would be a good place to go.
Fantastic. I definitely think food.
Right.
Key.
It's so sad when I think about some of the things I was thinking about. It's like, wait a minute. So I can make waffles every meal of the day while I'm in school. It's like, okay, where do I sign up? Right.
We are running up on our time. So as a last question for you, I'm curious, if there was one piece of advice, either in your personal life or from your career from a mentor or another individual that sort of stuck with you and that you could share with the students or families that are watching today.
Yeah. You know, when I was at Michigan, I had the privilege of hearing from one of my teachers, and that there's one thing he tried to impress upon us. And I was almost kind of just startled by like how much he was impressing. Like this is just, it wasn't like part of a curriculum. This is something I just say as what have you, but like you could tell he really, really believed this is, you know, to be bold. You know, there's so many times, especially as you start to get older, there are so many times where people tell you that, you know, you should make the safe choice, that you have to do things that, you know, will kind of limit your ability to go after like what your dreams are. And, you know, you just gotta take those things away. Like I always think about, you know, President Obama. One of my favorite books is The Audacity of Hope. And one of the stories he talks about is how, you know, when he was a state senator in Chicago, you know, he ran for Congress and he lost. And at that time, you know, he just felt so dejected. You know, he had a burgeoning family at the time. He had to, you know, he had more financial responsibilities. You know, there are all these things that had told, you know, that, you know, made him feel like, you know, there's something else that I have to do now, and I have to start, you know, thinking about these other things. And you do, don't get me wrong, you do have to, you know, take care of home. You do have, you know, there's certain responsibilities that you have to take care of. But he had this, you know, he chronicles this conversation he had with his wife, Michelle Obama, and he was saying like, look, and I know that maybe, you know, we have to start doing some of these other things, but I'm just going to go for it. You know, I'm a state senator. I just lost for Congress, but I'm going to run for United States Senate. And he talks about how he would go to these open house, you know, these meetings with, you know, to get to talk to folks, and there'd only be a few people were there. You know, he would sit through like a whole like event, you know, to be recognized, and they forget to do so. And like all of these things that made it harder and made him feel like, it could very well have made him feel like, why am I doing this? This is just a waste of time. But he didn't let that stop him. And because of that, he was able to go on, and he believed in himself, and he had invested in making sure that when he had an opportunity that he was ready. You know, it's like you only need that one pitch that comes right down the middle. And if you're ready for it and you put in the time in the batting range, you know, you can do a great job. And that's, you know, what propelled him to becoming United States Senator and then president, and, you know, everything that, you know, we know about him. So, and that always resonates with me with what that professor said, is to be bold. You know, when people tell you maybe it's not time, or maybe, you know, wait till another point. I mean, you want to think about it, but if you know you've put the time in and you know that you're ready and you can do this, you know, don't let people tell you can't. And one last thing I'll say, just given that, you know, we were just talking about this before, how we just found out that, you know, Chadwick Boseman and Black Panther just passed away, which is so sad. I'm still a huge Black Panther fan, but one of the things he actually said in his, we're talking about sayings, but one of the things he had actually said in his movie, which always stuck with me, is he said, and this is when he's like in the spiritual realm, and he's talking to, his father T'Chaka, and he says, in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the fools build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we're one single tribe. And just given all the unrest that we're seeing here and the polarized, conversations we have about, people's lives and, where we go, as a country, as a state, as a city, and, just, as our own little factions, we got to figure out a way to kind of work together as a single tribe. So, that's something that's kind of always stuck with me. And, rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. And, that's just another example of somebody. I mean, Chadwick, I believe, is someone who grew up in Harlem, and, he ended up making it to being, the Black Panther, Jackie Robinson being this huge movie star. And the people who've really made it, I mean, they've made it because they believed in themselves, they made it because they invested in themselves, and they made it because there wasn't anyone who can tell them that they weren't going to do it. And that's the lesson we really got to impress upon ourselves and the next generation more than anything else.
Jason, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Again, for anyone listening, Dream Chasers NYC, definitely check it out. Jason, thank you so much.
No problem. And thank you for everything you're doing, Sean.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
All right. See ya.